You know that feeling when you are like researching a major purchase for your home and you hit what I like to call the forum wall?
Oh, yeah. That is a very specific type of modern exhaustion.
Right. Like you start out just looking for a simple, straightforward answer, and suddenly it's 2 in the morning.
You've got 24 tabs open.
Exactly. And you're trying to decipher this highly heated, incredibly technical debate between complete strangers on the internet about a piece of hardware you didn't even know existed yesterday.
It's the classic rabbit hole. You just want to make a sound financial decision, but instead you are completely drowning in spec sheets.
And if you're a homeowner looking into solar power right now, you have almost certainly hit that forum wall on one specific unavoidable debate.
SolarEdge versus Enphase.
Yes, you're just trying to figure out how to generate power on your roof, and suddenly everyone is passionately arguing at you about inverters.
It's the ultimate solar bottleneck. Every single homeowner hits it eventually.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is entirely dedicated to settling this for you. We're pulling from this incredibly detailed, geographically specific source today.
Right. It's the SolarEdge versus Enphase, the Chicago Homeowners Solar Comparison Guide.
Yeah, that's the one. And our mission here is to just cut through all that glossy brand marketing you see online.
Because there is a lot of it.
So much. We are going to translate the raw, intimidating technical specs into actual real-world decision-grade knowledge. Stuff you can take straight to your kitchen table.
And the fundamental premise we really need to establish right away, the concept that shifts how you should be looking at this entire debate, is that this is not actually a brand decision.
It's a roof fit decision, right?
Exactly. A solar quote might look absolute flawless on paper. The financial return looks great. The system capacity lines up perfectly with your electric bill.
But that paper quote assumes a frictionless, perfectly sun-drenched roof.
Right. And in the physical world, your actual financial savings are entirely dictated by how your hardware handles your specific local constraints.
Things like moving shade, heavy snow, and like really complex roof geometry.
Which is why the Chicago focus of the source material is so perfect. A typical Chicago roof is anything but simple.
Okay, let's unpack this by looking at the actual physical architecture of these two systems. What are they actually doing up there on the roof?
Well, to understand how they handle real-world problems, we have to look at the physics of what an inverter actually does.
Right, because panels don't just pump power straight into your TV.
No, not at all. So solar panels absorb sunlight, and they generate direct current or DC power.
Okay.
Think of DC power like water flowing smoothly through a pipe in one single direction. It's just a continuous straight flow.
But our homes and appliances in the larger grid, they don't use that straight flow.
Exactly. They run on alternating current or AC power, where the current constantly reverses direction. It oscillates back and forth in a wave.
So that's the core mechanical challenge then.
Right. That one-way flow of DC power has to be chopped up, inverted, and manipulated into that AC wave before your house can use a single drop of it.
And the foundational difference between SolarEdge and Enphase just comes down to a geographic question. Where on your property does that physical conversion happen?
Let's start with SolarEdge. The source refers to this as a DC down architecture.
DC down. Got it. So what does that look like on the roof?
On your roof, bolted directly beneath each solar panel, SolarEdge installs these devices called power optimizers.
Okay, so they're at the panel level.
Yes, but they don't convert the power. They're incredibly smart. They condition the voltage and provide tracking, but they take that straight-flowing DC power and send it down a wire off your roof.
Down to a central unit, right?
Exactly. To a large, centralized string inverter that usually sits mounted on your garage or your basement wall. That single wall unit is what does the heavy lifting of flipping the DC into AC.
Okay, so the intelligence is distributed up on the roof, but the actual conversion engine is centralized on the wall.
Contrast that approach with Enphase, which uses an AC down architecture.
Because they use microinverters.
Right. There is a miniaturized inverter located directly beneath every single solar panel on your roof.
Wow, so every panel has its own engine, basically.
Yes. The DC to AC conversion happens right there, literally inches from where the power is generated.
So what travels down the wires from your roof to your main panel is already fully converted, grid-ready AC power.
Exactly.
You know, I always find it helpful to visualize this by thinking about those older, really cheap holiday lights.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, like if you've ever dealt with traditional legacy string solar inverters, they function a lot like those cheap lights. If one single bulb gets shaded by a tree branch or gets covered in dirt, the current drops for that bulb.
And because they're all wired in a single series, the entire string goes dark, or the output drops
Yeah,
massively.
the whole string is forced to perform at the level of its absolute weakest link.
In the solar industry, we actually call that phenomenon mismatch loss.
Mismatch loss, okay.
Yeah, if one panel is shaded and producing less current, it forces every other panel on that circuit to throttle down to match it. It wastes an enormous amount of potential energy.
But the guide emphasizes that both SolarEdge and Enphase have fundamentally solved that holiday light problem right.
They have. They both offer what is called module-level control.
So if one panel gets shaded, only that specific panel's output drops.
Exactly. The rest of the array just keeps pumping out power at maximum capacity. They just take different architectural paths to get there.
Because SolarEdge uses the optimizers to manage the mismatch before sending power to the wall.
While Enphase uses the microinverters to just convert the power independently right on the spot.
And understanding how they handle that mismatch is crucial when you look at a highly complex environment, like the Chicago context from our source guide.
Oh, absolutely. Chicago is famous for its historic bungalows.
Lots of weird roof lines.
Yeah, you've got dormers, second-story additions, chimneys, multiple roof planes facing completely different directions.
And the trees. The guide mentions Chicago has a massive urban tree footprint, like an estimated 18.9% canopy cover as of 2010.
We are talking of millions of mature trees, which means the shade on your roof is never static. It's a dynamic moving element.
Right as the earth rotates over the course of a day, the shadow cast by your neighbor's chimney or a big oak tree just slowly sweeps across your panels.
It's shading different parts of the array hour by hour, and that moving shadow makes module-level MPPT absolutely mandatory.
MPPT, that's maximum power point tracking, right?
Yes, you need a system that can constantly and independently adjust the voltage and current of every single panel to squeeze out every possible watt as the shade shifts.
And both architectures achieve this, which is why they basically dominate the market.
Exactly.
Before we move off the hardware, I do want to touch on a safety standard that pops up endlessly in these forum debates. People get very, very heated about rapid shutdown requirements.
They really do. And look, it is an important code. The National Electrical Code, specifically Section 690.12, mandates that solar systems must have rapid shutdown capabilities.
But this is strictly a safety measure,
Right.
for first responders.
Yes. If there's a fire and firefighters need to vent your roof, they need a guaranteed way to quickly de-energize the solar array so they don't encounter high-voltage live wires.
Right. But the guide is very clear on this. Both SolarEdge and Enphase fully comply with whatever local authority is enforcing this code.
They do. Enphase handles it inherently because converting to AC at the panel eliminates high-voltage DC runs across the roof anyway.
And SolarEdge.
SolarEdge handles it through its optimizers. They're engineered to automatically drop the DC voltage down to a safe 1 volt per panel the literal moment grid power is cut.
Okay, so safety is not the dividing line between these two brands. They're both exceptionally safe.
Right. Your decision has to hinge on the physical layout constraints of your property.
That makes perfect sense for the theoretical hardware design. But any homeowner knows that over a 25-year lifespan, hardware inevitably breaks.
It always does.
So how does that physical architecture dictate your actual repair experience?
Well, when we talk about reliability and system uptime, the beautiful theory of how a system operates crashes headfirst into the physical, grueling reality of fixing it.
And I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
Because looking at the architecture you just described, I feel like there's an obvious winner here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If Enphase uses microinverters and they fail in tiny isolated pieces, literally one panel at a time, while a SolarEdge central inverter failure takes down a massive chunk or all of your production, isn't Enphase automatically the better choice?
It distributes the risk. Yeah.
Right. Why would anyone want a single point of failure?
What's fascinating here is that you have to weigh that concept of distributed risk against the harsh physical reality of serviceability. You are entirely correct that Enphase distributes the risk. Losing one microinverter means you only lose one panel's worth of power. But consider the physical location of that failed component.
It's bolted underneath a panel up on the roof.
Exactly, up on your roof. Replacing a microinverter requires a solar tech to bring out a ladder, get up on your roof, unbolt the specific panel, physically lift it, swap the faulty unit, and resecure everything.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Picture a typical Chicago winter. You have heavy snow layers of ice on pitched dormers post-storm cleanup. Solar installers operate under incredibly tight safety windows during the winter.
Right. They physically cannot put crews on an icy pitched roof.
They won't do it. A single microinverter failure in January might mean you are waiting weeks or even months for a thaw before a crew can safely access the repair site.
Wow, well, that one panel just sits there producing nothing.
Now flip the scenario and look at the centralized SolarEdge model. Yes, a central inverter failure is a much larger event that pauses a greater share of your savings.
But where is that central unit located?
It's mounted on the wall inside your garage or down in your basement.
Oh, wow. So in the middle of a January blizzard, an installer can just pull their truck into your driveway, walk into your warm garage, and swap out the central inverter components.
And have your entire system back online in an hour entirely off the roof?
That completely upends the reliability debate. It's not just about what breaks or even how much of the system goes down. It's about how accessible the broken part is when it inevitably fails.
And that accessibility directly impacts your system's uptime. And uptime is what protects your financial return.
Right.
This is also why the software side, the monitoring, is just as critical as the hardware. Both platforms offer incredibly robust monitoring suites, Enphase Enlighten and SolarEdge monitoring.
And because both systems use module-level electronics, they don't just send a generic alert saying, hey, the system is down.
No, they provide precise pinpoint diagnostics.
Like an X-ray for your roof. The installer can log in remotely and see exactly which microinverter or optimizer is throwing a fault code.
That remote visibility removes all the diagnostic guesswork. The installer doesn't have to send a crew out just to figure out what's wrong, order the part, and then come back a week later.
They can order the exact replacement part immediately and arrive at your property equipped for a single trip fix.
Exactly. But fixing it isn't just a matter of physical access or software alerts. There is a massive financial trap here that the source material points out regarding how these repairs are actually paid for.
Oh, the warranties.
Yeah.
Warranties are where the rubber meets the road.
Yes. You will see different theoretical approaches to warranties. Enphase heavily markets a 25-year coverage period on their microinverters tied to specific activation windows.
And SolarEdge.
SolarEdge utilizes a versioning approach where different components like the optimizers versus the central inverter have different baseline warranty lengths that you have to verify based on the exact generation of equipment you're buying.
But the guide makes a critical distinction that I think most homeowners completely miss when reviewing their quotes. You absolutely must separate the manufacturer's warranty from the installer's workmanship warranty.
This is so important. The manufacturer, whether that's Enphase or SolarEdge, only covers the physical hardware.
So if a microinverter fries, Enphase will happily ship a replacement box?
Sure. But they do not cover the cost of the human being who has to drive a truck to your house, climb onto your roof, and spend 3 hours doing the labor.
It's the local installer's workmanship warranty and their service policy that dictates who pays for the labor, the travel time, and the roof work.
Right. You could have a fully warranted free replacement part from the manufacturer and still be handed a $600 labor bill just to get it installed if your installer doesn't explicitly cover those truck rolls.
That is wild, which I guess is a perfect segue into the long-term economics of this investment, because the financial landscape of solar is actively changing.
It's shifting dramatically. If you're modeling out a 25-year lifespan, you cannot just think about solar panels anymore. You have to talk about energy storage.
You have to talk about batteries.
Yes.
And for anyone in the Chicago area, this isn't some distant abstract future. The source highlights a massive looming economic shift hitting the ComEd utility territory.
After January 1st, 2025, new solar customers are going to face a drastically altered net metering reality.
They will receive lower export values, specifically what are called supply-only credits, for the excess power they send back to the grid.
And to understand why that is so disruptive, you have to look at how traditional net metering worked. Historically, the utility grid essentially acted as your 100% efficient, perfectly free battery.
Right. During a sunny afternoon, your panels produce way more power than your house is using.
You export that excess to the grid, and the utility gives you a one-to-one retail credit. You send them $1 worth of electricity at noon, and you pull $1 worth of electricity back at night.
But under a supply-only credit system, that math breaks. Because when you look at an electric bill, you pay for the supply of the power and you pay for the delivery infrastructure.
Right. When this rule changes, ComEd will only credit you for the supply portion of the power you export, which is just pennies on the dollar compared to the retail rate.
So what does this all mean?
It means the financial incentive completely flips. You are heavily penalized for exporting power.
So to preserve your return on investment, you have to prioritize self-consumption. You want to trap and use every single kilowatt hour your panels generate inside your own home.
Exactly, rather than selling it back to the grid at a steep discount. And that is exactly where batteries transition from being a luxury backup item into an active daily economic tool.
You use a battery to soak up that midday solar overproduction.
You store it locally and then you discharge it to run your house in the evening when the sun sets, entirely avoiding the utilities' retail rates.
Which brings us right back to our hardware debate. How do SolarEdge and Enphase handle batteries? The guide breaks this down into AC-coupled versus DC-coupled energy storage systems.
And here we have to talk about the thermodynamic tax of moving energy around.
The tax.
Yeah, every time you convert power from DC to AC or AC back to DC, you lose a percentage of that energy as heat. It's a physical penalty.
So let's trace the path of an AC-coupled battery, which is very common in the Enphase ecosystem.
Okay, so in an Enphase system, the microinverters on the roof have already converted the solar energy into AC power. That AC power travels down into your house.
And if you want to store it in a battery, that battery has to connect on the AC side of your home's electrical panel.
But a battery intrinsically stores energy chemically as DC power.
Oh, I see.
This means an AC-coupled battery requires its own entirely separate internal inverter to take the AC power from your house, convert it back into DC, and push it into the battery cells.
So you're converting DC to AC on the roof, sending it down, and then converting it from AC back to DC to store it. You are basically paying that thermodynamic efficiency tax twice.
You are. However, that AC-coupled architecture is incredibly friendly for future retrofitting.
Because it's sort of its own independent system.
Exactly. Because the battery has its own independent conversion pathway, you can easily add an Enphase battery to a house 3 or 5 years after the solar was installed without ripping out or replacing any of the existing solar hardware.
It's just plug and play almost. Now contrast that with a DC-coupled system, which is the hallmark of the SolarEdge hybrid inverter approach.
In a DC-coupled architecture, the power comes off the roof as DC. It travels down to the central SolarEdge inverter.
But instead of converting it to AC immediately, what happens?
That central hub can route the DC power directly into the battery, bypassing the inversion process entirely. It shares a single bidirectional inverter pathway.
So you completely eliminate that secondary conversion penalty. The energy stays DC from the moment it hits the solar panel to the moment it rests in the battery.
Yes, it's a highly integrated, highly efficient setup.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your future plans for energy storage might actually be the ultimate tiebreaker in this entire debate.
The source guide points out that if you are designing a system today, you shouldn't just ask which inverter is better. You need to ask which solar and storage ecosystem best aligns with your timeline.
Are you prioritizing the absolute maximum day one efficiency of a DC-coupled system? Or do you want the modular, easy-to-retrofit flexibility of an AC-coupled system down the line?
It's a critical choice.
Okay, so we've covered the physical architecture, the harsh reality of winter repairs, and the shifting economics of batteries. Now let's put you, the listener, right at your kitchen table staring across at a solar installer who just handed you a quote.
Right. This is where it gets real.
How do you actually use all of this knowledge to ensure you aren't getting taken for a ride?
You have to force the installer to step away from their marketing script and provide a real engineered proposal. The quality of the installation company matters vastly more than minor hardware nuances.
I think of standard solar quotes like buying a car based purely on how the manufacturer says it performs on a pristine closed test track.
That's a very fair comparison.
A quote might proudly state you're purchasing an 8-kilowatt system, but the actual usable kilowatt hours that system produces in your specific driveway in Chicago winter traffic can vary wildly depending on the mathematical assumptions the installer baked into their proposal.
Which is why you must demand to see their shade modeling. Do not just accept a blanket production estimate.
The source guide specifically tells homeowners to ask if the installer uses PD watts or SAM-style modeling. I hear those acronyms thrown around, but what is the actual difference?
Well, PV Watts is a very basic blunt instrument calculator provided online. It's great for a rough ballpark estimate, but it often assumes ideal conditions.
And SAM.
SAM stands for the System Advisor Model, which is a highly advanced tool developed by the National Renewable Energy Lab. A SAM-level model acts like a scalpel.
Okay, so it's much more precise.
It factors in complex 3D shading from that massive 18.9% tree canopy we discussed. It calculates mismatch losses across different roof planes. It even models historical weather patterns and dirt buildup.
So if an installer is using a highly detailed model, they are confident in their engineering.
Exactly.
Once you verify the production model, you have to lock down those warranty realities we talked about. You need to ask about their SLA,
Yeah.
their service level agreement.
You need it in writing.
Yeah.
What is their guaranteed response time if your system goes offline? And crucially, who pays the labor for the truck roll?
Right. If an optimizer fails in year 7, does their SLA explicitly state that the labor to swap it is fully covered by them? Or are you going to be handed an out-of-pocket invoice?
And finally, when you want to know if the equipment they are pushing is actually reliable, don't just ask, hey, is this good hardware?
Because they'll obviously just say yes.
Exactly. The source recommends asking for their 24-month RMA rate.
RMA rate, return merchandise authorization.
Yes. It's the formal industry metric for how often equipment fails and gets shipped back to the manufacturer. Ask the installer directly over the last 2 years, what is your specific RMA failure rate for central inverters, for microinverters, and for communication gateways?
Wow, that's a direct question.
A transparent, high-quality installer tracks this data meticulously. They know exactly which hardware forces them to roll trucks, and they won't hesitate to share that reality with you.
So if we synthesize all of this into an ultimate recommendation matrix from the source guide here, is how you make the call. You lean toward SolarEdge when you are dealing with a complex roof featuring heavy moving shade.
You want that granular optimizer level control to mitigate mismatch losses, but you want to keep the heavy conversion hardware off the roof and easily accessible on your garage wall.
Right, and you lean toward Enphase when your priority is a highly distributed architecture.
Yeah.
You want a system that if it fails in tiny, isolated single-panel pieces rather than large blocks.
And you prefer that straightforward modular approach, especially if you foresee taking an easy AC-coupled retrofit path for batteries in the future.
Ultimately, the best brand isn't a universal truth. The best brand is the one that is modeled honestly for your specific roof's constraints and is backed by an installer who provides a transparent written service plan to protect your uptime.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you approach this decision. Throughout this discussion, we've talked about module-level monitoring purely as a diagnostic tool for finding broken parts.
Right, like an X-ray.
But think about the 25-year lifespan of this system. Over 2.5 decades, your local urban tree canopy is going to change dramatically. Trees will grow, die, or be cut down.
Well, that's true. The shade profile is guaranteed to evolve.
Exactly. By installing SolarEdge or Enphase, you're replacing a highly granular, incredibly precise data collection network across the entire surface of your home.
Fast forward a decade when you go to sell your house. You won't just be telling a buyer the house has solar.
You will be handing them a quarter-century of verifiable module-by-module financial performance data. It acts like a Carfax report for your roof.
Wow, a Carfax for your roof.
That data proves the system's exact financial yield to the penny and can even reveal structural realities like if a specific section of the roof begins sagging over time and pooling snow differently.
You aren't just buying a power plant today. You are generating a verifiable financial and structural history that becomes a permanent asset to your property's value.
It really changes how you look at the upfront cost.
It completely changes it. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. You officially have the knowledge to break right through that form wall. Take this understanding of the architecture, take that interrogation checklist, and take control of your next installer meeting. You've got this.